It is Monday, August 5th. I'm Armstrong Williams, your moderator. Welcome to Your Voice, Your Future, and thank you so much for joining us. Joe Paul, Cash Patel, Tyler, and Robert, all are in the house. Cash, he'll join us later. So let me start with Robert Patillo. Robert, how are you doing, sir? Always a pleasure having you on. So, I've had so many people that read Project 25. I just decided to do this on my own, have people read Project 25. And no one seems to, on both sides, seems to come away with what the left has used to distort what was written, what is being conveyed, and what they're saying about the country. I want to hear from you, Robert Patillo. Have you read Project 25? Have you read any of it?
I actually read all 925 pages of it back in the end of 2022 when it was released. And I think that it's not something that people are fear-mongering about. There's a reason that President Trump has disavowed Project 2025. There's a reason that the head of Project 2025 has already resigned. There's a reason that the GOP has not incorporated Project 2025 into their platform, but they're going with Agenda 47. People aren't making up what's in it. You can go directly to the pages. When they talk about getting rid of the Department of Education, when they talk about firing 50,000 public service workers and replacing them with MAGA loyalists, where they talk about the largest mass deportation in American history, literally rounding up people, putting them in camps and carrying them off. These are things that severely scare many Americans. They talk about outlawing pornography and jailing people who create those sorts of things. I don't know if that includes Melania Trump. I don't know what exactly that would include. But we have to understand this is an issue for Republicans, and they should have nipped it in the bud far sooner than they did.
Tyler, of course you're going to respond to it. You are at the Heritage Foundation. How do you respond to Robert?
Well, I think Robert has accurately seen a few of the proposals in Project 2025. I think his spin on it is rather interesting because what we've seen in the past few years, and I mean really going back decades, is that the administrative state has been captured by these woke elites. And you talk about bringing in Trump loyalists. We see this as bringing the government back into alignment with the way that the Democratic, the way that the voters vote. When you talk about the federal government today, a lot of the rules that Americans have to live by are issued by these bureaucrats without input often from Congress and without input sometimes from the very president of the United States to whom they technically report. But a lot of these people are so protected by the arcane rules of the administrative state that they can't be fired even if they actively oppose the agenda of the people's democratically elected president. So you had a lot of people bragging during the Trump years that they were part of a deep state against the Trump administration. First, Trump was complaining about the deep state, then a lot of them proudly identified themselves as such. And that's proof that we need to clean house in the administrative state.
And clean house and deploy them with MAGA?
Well, no.
Did you actually use MAGA in the 900-page report? You used MAGA?
No.
Well, Robert said you did.
That's where Rob is wrong.
You did not use MAGA?
No. The main way that you identify
Are you trying
to
ban? Now, I'm not into pornography, so let me just be clear on that. It's just my thing. But I know a lot of people who are. Are you trying to ban pornography?
Well, so that is a suggestion in Project 2025.
But how do you plan to ban pornography?
Oh, me personally?
No, Project 25. How are you going to carry that out? Are you going to censor people? Lock them up? I'm just trying to...
I mean, it's...
How do you do it?
The question, man.
That's the thing. So, like, if we talk about reparations, how are you going to do reparations? There are
what
a lot
does reparations have to do with talking about pornography?
No. So I'm showing you where the debate is. The reason why banning pornography is in Project 2025 is because we've found a problem in our civil society where not as many people are getting married, not as many people are having children. And one of the potential explanations for that is the negative impact of pornography. And also you see feminists and conservatives can line up on when it comes to pornography. It is enabling a lot of really horrible behavior.
Then what about all the other sins?
All the other,
yeah. Wait a minute. I mean, we're going to talk about.
There's a lot of them.
There's a lot of sin.
Well, theft is theft and murder, we have laws against those. We have laws against many sins. And I mean, if you look at the 10 Commandments, it's kind of interesting that the one sin that we have the least laws about is adultery in our country today. We now have no fault
Should we
divorce.
stone them?
Well, of course not.
Oh, I'm just
do we stone murderers today? Do we stone the guy who set up the 9/11 attacks? We gave him
here's the good thing.
Yeah.
Let me just give some love. Robert read the report, and Tyler's not pushing it back hard on Robert. So we're going to move on. I found out what I needed to know, about this. But anyhow, moving on. So let me go to Joe Paul. When you talk about, there's this huge thing going on now that crime is at an all-time low. But if you talk to all the crime experts in the country, they said, what crime? Because juvenile crime is up 200 to 300% all across America. Yeah. Are we selectively choosing the crime that we want to say that's low while ignoring the crime that's causing the most damage in this country?
You would think that's the case. I think that when you look at crime, it's a little different because crime is down overall, but yes, you see crime increasing within juveniles because guess what? They have nothing to do. And so we need this administration and future administrations to redirect resources to train these young people, to give them job opportunities, training opportunities, so they're not out there committing crimes. They're bored, and the devil's playground is an idle mind and an idle hands, and so we would need to make sure that we redirect resources towards the youth of this country to make sure that they're not in the streets. But
redirect them where? Redirect the resources where?
Yeah, to organizations who are working toward boots on the ground, and I'm not talking about the NAACPs of the world or the urban leagues. They've shown that they do very great work at building amazing buildings. However, some of the programming and impact lacks. I mean, if we're being real here, and I think we're amongst friends, so we need to now redirect these resources towards organizations who have a demonstrated history of working with under-resourced, underrepresented, historically minority, marginalized communities, and there are tons of them out there. They just don't have the brand amplification as an NAACP or an urban league. And I'm a life member of both, by the way. So, it's not that I'm calling them out. And just like if you buy stocks, I call them and I'm like, hey, you need to change your ways. And so that's what I mean. The resources need to be redirected towards the people who can make a difference.
Robert Hillard, are you comfortable with the vice president's bona fides as it relates to foreign policy, dealing with the China and the Russia and the Zelenskys and Israel and Iran and Hezbollah of the world?
Yes, absolutely. I would remind you that President Trump's foreign policy bona fides prior to entering office.
But I didn't ask you about President Trump. I asked you about the vice president. No. We're going to get to that. I only asked you. You guys are good at this, but not today. I only asked you about the vice president, not about Trump. We'll get to Trump. Let's talk about her.
Remember, early in this administration, one of the things that Vice President Harris had to do was go to Africa and rebuild our relationships on the African continent after 4 years of America First. So she went to Uganda. She went and met with African leaders. She provided billions of dollars of aid to those nations across the African continent that had been influenced by the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative and had become economic vassals to those nations. In addition to that, the conservatives like to say she was the border czar. That was not the mandate she was given by the president. She was mandated to work with the nations within our hegemonic sphere of influence and create the goals to reduce the flow, stem the tide of migration coming to our southern border. So she met with the president of Mexico. She met with the presidents of Central America, of Costa Rica, Panama, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, to make the types of reforms that have created the conditions we have now, where you have 5 consecutive months of lower immigration at our southern border. Immigration at our southern border is at the lowest level it has been since August of 2020, prior to them entering office. So when we talk about her foreign policy bona fides, well, we can look at what's happened throughout Central America, throughout Africa that were within her portfolio to see that she has plenty of experience working with these world leaders. And as I mentioned, the previous president only foreign policy was finding wives in Eastern Europe. So I would take her experience over that.
Well, I must tell you, I am just amazed because this is something that I was not aware of. Were you?
Somewhat.
Somewhat, okay. It needs to be a lot. Okay, somewhat. So, Robert, I'm gonna have Tyler O'Neill. Were you aware of this stellar record? Even though it's isolated to Africa and Central America, were you aware?
No, I mean, it's shocking to me because what I've seen is the root causes of immigration, which she was tasked to oversee, have only gotten worse under this administration. We've seen, President Biden likes to have a fig leaf over the border issues so that he can claim that these people are legal, even while he's importing millions of people. And what he does is he says, oh, we're going to have them come through ports of entry. We're going to create an app to facilitate more of this immigration. And by the way, oh, Kamala, you're going to solve the root causes of immigration. Well, what are the root causes of immigration? You might want to look at the open border. You might want to look at who's incentivizing people to come to this country in the first place, declaring from day one that all of the things that Trump set in place that kept immigration down are suddenly going to be thrown out the window. So if you talk about root causes, and yes, Kamala has gone to these Central American countries, and she has achieved a few solutions here and there. But when you look at where the immigration is coming from, it's not just from the Northern Triangle. We're seeing it from Venezuela. We're seeing it from China. We're seeing Chinese nationals showing up outside our military bases under this administration. We're seeing people on the terrorist watch list crossing that open border and posing threats here, to the degree that, according to my sources, people are worried that one of the ways that Iran is going to respond to Israel's attacks in Iran is by carrying out an attack in the United States of America, because they might have officials operating here. So when you talk about Kamala Harris's record, you can't just say, oh, the last few weeks, suddenly immigration is down and therefore she was successful. You have to look at the entire last 4 years, and you have to look at the way that the root causes of this crisis have not been addressed, even if she has traveled to those Northern Triangle countries and worked out a couple deals here and there.
And this is Your Voice, Your Future. I'm Armstrong Williams, and we'll be back. And welcome back to the broadcast with our very distinguished guest. Let me go back to Robert Patillo. Robert Patillo, why do Democrats feel that former President Donald Trump is an existential threat to democracy?
Because he said so. And I take people at their word. As Maya Angelou once said, when somebody tells you who they are, believe them the first time. He is an individual who, the last time he lost an election, we saw January 6th take place. He's an individual who has said, I will be a dictator on day one. They may say he was joking. I don't take things like that as a joke. He was the person who decided to pal around with Kim Jong-un, who said that he believed Vladimir Putin, who was holding a glowing globe with MDS and allowed him to kill Khashoggi without retribution. He had a recent meeting with the Hungarian dictator Viktor Orban. If you look at much of what is in Project 2025, as was just mentioned, it was about consolidating power into the hands of the executive, taking away power from the legislature, taking away power from the courts, and putting that directly within the legislative branch to be able to essentially move the Article 2 powers of the Constitution above Article 1 powers of the Constitution. So when an individual tells you exactly who they are and exactly what they're going to do, you can either think think they're joking, think they're kidding, or you can believe exactly what they have said. President Trump has made it clear that his view is that he wants to be America's dictator on day one. Even if you look at some of the glowing things he said about people such as Hitler, people such as President Xi, other strongmen around the world, he has told you what he believes in and what his governing philosophy is, and I think we should take him at his word.
Tyler, your reply?
It's absurd. I mean, no, he's not trying to elevate Article 2 over Article 1. Article 1 is still the #1 article. The interesting thing is we're trying to return to the Constitution from the bureaucratic administrative state that has taken over all of the articles. So what we saw under the Supreme Court this term was them finally getting rid of Chevron deference. That's a huge win for all 3 of the branches of government and a huge loss for the 4th branch of government, which is the administrative state. This means that Congress, which always had this power, can make new laws to limit the administrative state. It did so with the Administrative Procedure Act, but there have been things that chip away at that act. And when it comes to the Article 2 powers that Project 2025 does want to return to the office of the president, because the president, unlike the administrative state, is elected by the people every 4 years. That is returning to the founder's vision of who executes the laws. And of course, we want a muscular Supreme Court to call balls and strikes and to interpret the rules that the administrative state brings down, not to just roll over and defer to them in the way that Chevron did. So if you look at Project 2025, if you look at what a potential another conservative administration would look like, it does not look like a dictatorship. It does not look like democracy overthrown. It looks like a return to democracy, away from the woke elites that have wrested the power away from the people in the name of following the experts. Well, we all remember what following the experts meant during the COVID-19 pandemic. Let's actually return the power to the people.
What's fascinating is that many people are waiting to hear the vice president speak on policy. Mm-hmm. But I think it's obvious that President Joe Biden was elected on the platform and the policies that they advocate now. I think it's being naive or foolish to believe that the vice president is going to do anything different. The question I ask, because remember, no matter what they say to you about the polls, Trump is still leading where it matters. Mm-hmm. But can the vice president stand on the current policies of Biden and win the election in November?
No, she can't. The answer is no, she cannot. She has to draw a clear line in the sand between the old administration, which is the Biden-Harris, and then the Harris insert VP name here. So she has to absolutely pick a side. You see where she made a comment about Israel, the war must end. There are a lot of disenfranchised voters who support Palestinians in this fight, and so Kamala Harris has to speak to those folks. And going a little deeper, I represent Black Men Vote, and so Kamala Harris has a rare opportunity during the DNC to address Black men in particular and the Black community as a whole, and really come with clear policies and champion policies around how are you going to uplift these communities. Those are the difference makers between now and November. But if she continues with the same old, we've seen it before. And I think that's one of the arguments with Trump. We've been there before. Do we want to go back? And as we talk about Project 2025, the goal with Project 2025 is to take us back to the glory days. But what year was that? Was it the 60s? Was it the 40s? Was it 20s? I mean, how far back do we go? And so when you think about Kamala Harris, she has to draw a line in the sand. She has to be very strategic with who she picks as her VP, because that's going to also speak to a community, a base that she definitely will lose as a result of Biden not being in the race. And so she has to be really, really smart about that. But no, it cannot be the same old. She has to draw a line in the sand and pick a side.
Robert.
Oh, absolutely. She can run on the Biden policies and win. Remember, the issue with Biden was he just old as hell. But if you look at the policies...
Robert, I was going to ask you a different question. I'm asking you
okay. Hey, sure, go ahead.
No, I'm going to ask you a different question. The question I want to ask you is this. The biggest issue during this entire 4 years with the Biden administration has been the open borders. Some has labeled it as an invasion. What is it that the vice president must do moving forward? Because this is not a black, white, left, right issue. This is an American issue. People feel it is a crisis. Should she do anything to change the Biden policies, or just continue full steam ahead?
Well, one, I think she has to articulate where this problem actually stems from. And as I've articulated previously, Republicans have walked away from every single bipartisan immigration bill over the course of the last 25 years. You can go back to McCain-Kennedy in 2005, the Schumer Compromise in 2013, the Obama Compromise in 2015, the Durbin-Rubio in 2018, the Reconciliation Bill in 2021, the Langford Compromise in 2024. So what we have seen this year is that once President Biden took executive action outside of Republicans, remember, President Trump told Republicans, don't vote in favor of this bill. You might fix the issue before November, and that'll be bad for me. So Republicans decided they wanted open borders if it would help President Trump. But what we've seen is that the executive order is working, and that we have to now have full legislative vote from the Congress in order to help make these issues permanent. We have to deal with dreamers. We have to deal with pathway to citizenship. We have to deal with increasing the funding for immigration courts so we can process asylum claims that are concurrent with international law. We have to ensure that we're creating a guest worker program so we can actually fulfill the needs that we have for workers here in America while also allowing seasonal workers to return back home. We have to deal with the H-1B visa program that's being exploited by many companies to take high-paying tech jobs away from Americans and allow those to be filled by individuals from other countries. There's an entire dossier of things that can be done, and Vice President Harris has to make it clear that Democrats are ready to move on these things on day one, but it has been Republicans holding these things up for the last 25 years because, one, they enjoy the cheap labor for their corporate buddies who want to pay people under minimum wage to work serfdom level jobs, and then two, because it is a political issue that they can kick down the line every single election cycle, and that regardless of them being in office or having full majorities, they've done nothing about it since the turn of the century.
Let me tell you my challenge with this argument. Most people hearing this argument will get lost. Here's one thing that people know. Trump, like Biden, did not need the Congress to address the crisis at the border. Trump used executive orders. Supposedly, not supposedly, the current president did put in an executive order. But still, the flow of migrants in this country was overwhelming. They didn't put teeth to it. They didn't put resources to it. Now, you can say whatever you want to say. When you're president of the United States, you get the credit, like the recent hostage release. Get that credit, but you own the border crisis. And you can try to blame it on Trump and the Republican legislation, but I got to tell you, Tyler, that's just not going to fly in the November election.
No, it's not going to fly at all, because also what we saw, Biden took action on day one. He said he was going to take action on day one, and he did. And it's interesting to hear Robert say that Trump did nothing on this issue, when at the same time the left is demonizing the Muslim ban, which really was a ban on people coming from countries of terror concern. Let's remember, North Korea is not exactly a Muslim country last time I checked. But he also built the wall. He worked hard to build that wall. And you can say what you want about building a wall, but it sent a message. It said, look, America cares about its borders. We're going to enforce our laws. And when we welcome immigrants here, which we do, and I think that's the main thing that everyone on both sides of the aisle can agree on, is that we have a lot of immigrants who belong in this country, who, Afghan refugees, when we pulled out of Afghanistan, we left that country in a horrible shape, and we should welcome with open arms the people who need to come here because we left them no choice and allowed the Taliban to take over. And so, we've seen from this administration's record, we've seen them pull out of Afghanistan, and yet when you have the Afghan migrants who we want in this country coming, people who fought alongside the U.S. in Afghanistan are now coming here, and they're seeing people cross that border illegally without going through any of the hoops that they needed to go through. It is a tremendous insult. And then these illegal aliens being held up at hotels, being given large amounts of money by state and local governments to live. I mean, it's egregious. Meanwhile, our former allies, the people who fought alongside us in this country that Biden shamefully abandoned, are now seeing the people who are not legal, who did not follow the process, being treated favorably. That is the insult of a century. And we have to say, look, and this is the thing Robert brought up, the mass deportations that Project 2025 mentions. And, you know, I'm glad he did, because how else do you solve a problem like 10 million illegal aliens coming into this country? I'm like, I want to help the people who deserve to be here. And I want to help especially everyone who follows that legal pathway, who waits for years, like my friends growing up in school did. I had classmates who were legal immigrants from Mexico, and I'm proud today to call them my fellow American citizens because they went through the process. It is a humongous insult to them that 10 million people can enter this country, a number larger than the population of the state of Virginia, which was the birthplace of presidents, I'd have you know. Like, this is egregious. And
we got your point. Yeah. You have made your point. We're going to take a break, and we're going to come back with more on Your Voice, Your Future Town Hall.
It is easier to build up strong children than to try and repair broken men.
The streets are plagued with crime, violence, there's a lot of poverty, and it's all a result of lack of education that's happening in our schools. So it really is a crisis.
We come from very different political perspectives, but we've come to the same conclusion, and that is there is a crisis in the classroom. Children are being deprived of quality of life because they're being deprived of a good education. We must solve this problem. It's incumbent upon all of us to join hands together to get this done.
We can't afford to wait one more day before we address these issues, because every day we lose another child.
Let's stop the politicking. Let's stop the games. Let's really do something to give these kids a real chance at life and being a part of that American dream.
We need accountability for funding. Many of the districts where you're seeing very low test scores, students graduating with very low literacy and math comprehension rates, they are receiving a lot of funding. So where is the money going where our kids aren't being adequately educated?
If you believe every child is deserving of a quality education, please go to educationjusticefoundation.com.
So, Joe Paul, law enforcement has come out saying that the vice president was a huge supporter of defund the police. She's very sympathetic to the pro-Palestinian protesters. Law and order is something that's very important to all communities in this country. What is it that the vice president must do to earn the trust of law enforcement throughout this country?
She may already have the trust. I mean, she's a former prosecutor, federal prosecutor, former attorney general. She's been a top cop herself, so to speak, right? And so she may already have.
But she has changed. She's evolved from there. You know,
She's evolved, rightfully so.
She's not the same person.
She's not. And I don't think she can be the same person,
No.
right? She has to appeal to the masses. I mean, that's the only way that you get elected. But one of the things that she has to do is reassure law enforcement and many other communities that she has policies that supports them. And so, of course, if crime is rampant, we need officers in the streets. We need that. However, we also need to find programs that don't support the criminal activity of police and police over-policing communities that shouldn't be policed.
Such a small percentage compared to overall crime.
It could be, right?
It is.
It is, but it's still there. It's still a percentage that we definitely need to consider. And so I believe that she may not have as much of an issue as people think with law enforcement. I mean, you're seeing now these polls, you have to trust some of them. I mean, maybe they're wild and crazy, but this is the voice of the people. So you have to trust some of these polls that are coming out that are quite favorable to the vice president. And so I think that should be...
Define favorable to the VP.
I mean, she's up 2-3 points in some cases. She's, I mean, it's, yeah, folks are energized. I mean, you know, people are putting money where their mouth is.
As they were with Hillary Clinton when she led President Barack Obama about 48 percentage points.
But the biggest difference between...
I mean, Trump by 48 points.
Absolutely, but one of the biggest difference between Kamala Harris and Hillary Clinton is Hillary Clinton just expected people to come out. I mean, she was really moving hard on surrogates and getting Jay-Z and Beyonce to throw concerts on her behalf and expecting voters to just come out.
Let me interrupt you a minute. So, David Axelrod, former Obama strategist, saying this exuberance for the vice president is very dangerous.
He says dangerous.
Very dangerous. Because, let me paint a picture for you. And I'm a broadcaster, okay? Since the vice president has secured the Democratic nomination, I've searched all the mainstream stream media. There's not been one story challenging her, taking her to task about things of the past, about her. Not one. Every story as if it's a coronation. Every story about Trump, you would think that he was the devil incarnate.
He's earned those. He's earned that.
Yeah, but wait. Don't you think at some point that the vice president has realized that she's going to be tested?
Of course.
She's going to be challenged. This is a honeymoon, and the media is a very dangerous business.
They'll turn on you and drop. Yeah, absolutely.
In a heartbeat. So, how does she, after Labor Day, because nothing gets serious until after Labor Day.
That's right.
So these are minefields. But don't you think, at least for the fourth estate, they should be balanced instead of, because you know she's going to get a bounce coming out of the Democratic convention. But what they're doing now is not even realistic.
Yeah. Well, they're going to have to be really, really smart about that approach. They have to show that she's been battle tested. The problem with the Democrats is they've had Kamala Harris in the back of a closet for the past 3.5 years, right? And nobody's known what she's done. That's a problem. That's a problem. And intentionally, because for Democrats, success looks like 2 terms. And so Joe was, whether he's on a respirator, was committed to running. And so that's no longer the case. And now we're kind of, you know, Democrats are playing catch up to position Kamala as someone who's made a difference over the past 3 years, but it's hard to quantify her impact because she hasn't been around. We haven't seen her. And so so she has a lot of homework to do. She has a lot of catching up to do, but I don't think it's insurmountable. I think we have a little over 90 days before the election, and she has to show that she's been battle tested and that she can actually prove that she can do this on day one.
Robert Patillo, and I already know what your answer is. I hate to be so presumptuous, but does it bother you, and I hear this from a lot of people whispering around America, that they felt that from the media to the president's cabinet, to his inner circle, to his family, to his closest advisors, they were reassured that his cognitive skills could not have been better, that he was in tip-top shape, he was sharp, he was on it, he was running the country, but then all of a sudden, the presidential debate and people saw the truth. So given that, do you think that that is a problem moving forward? Particularly everything is about trust, and it should be about trust, that the fact that the American people were lied to. Now listen, I could be lied to because I saw it every day, not for common sense, and I said it sitting on the set. I said, man, he's declining every week. Now, I didn't need to be told, but I'm not going to put everybody in the same category that we're in. Because you know, I talked about it on this
for sure we did.
Joe is declining. But they made us believe that he wasn't. And all of a sudden, he just collapsed. And you rarely see him now, by the way, or hear from him.
Well, I actually have a separate issue with that entire process, because I have spoken to the president recently, and I think he's in fine condition. I have a bigger issue. Hold on, Armstrong, I'm going to surprise you. I have a bigger issue with this idea that there's a job title in this country that's above the pay grade of the president. I think we all saw at the debate, as soon as they came back, everyone looked down on their phone, on whether it's CNN, MSNBC, or Fox, and it's like they got a text message that said it's time to get rid of Granddaddy, and then all of a sudden, the entire majority of the fourth estate decided that Joe Biden it was time to get rid of him. And the fact that you can have a pressure campaign against a sitting president of the United States by unnamed advisors, insiders, donors, etc. I call it the Hollywood coup. The press, exactly, of individuals who are not elected, unnamed, and as if we had George Clooney and Stephen Colbert pick who the new president of the United States is. And I think many people are going to have an issue with that. This is going to be a come to Jesus meeting Democrats are going to have after this election to explain who exactly runs this party, who exactly is driving this ship right now. Because if they can tell the president of the United States, who was democratically elected, who received 14 million votes during the primary season, to step down, and without any outside voices, without the voices of the people, they're able to do that, then what else are they able to do? Are those people able to dictate tax policy? Are they able to dictate foreign policy? Are they able to dictate what the courts do? I would like to know who these people are who run our country, who are able to make the president step down. And I think that's the bigger issue the American people are going to have concerns with.
Now, I a lot of respect for what Robert just said. This was a coup d'etat. But not only was this a coup d'etat with Biden, it's also in making sure they gave the nomination to Harris. They wanted no competition. And this is why, and I know probably later on the night or tomorrow, the vice president will select her running mate, but this is why the running mate process is so brutal right now. I mean, it is brutal. It is lethal because of the process with the president and the vice president, and now it's beginning to show its ugly head and her selected. I mean, when John Fetterman talked about Shapiro, and they're in the same state, I said, well, what is going on here? He made it clear that he's not the right choice. And then, because he's moderate, he believes in choice in education, he's a pro-supporter of Israel, and all of a sudden, there's this pushback. But it is definitely playing out in the party right now, what Robert just alluded to, Tyler.
Yeah, well, I was interesting. Robert, I'm glad to hear that you support Project 2025, that you want to restrain the power of the unelected elites and the people who are making the decisions behind the decisions. I mean, this is wonderful news. I do actually have one quibble with what you said, though. I think we know exactly who made the decision. Right before Biden finally announced, that the coup was on, a certain man named Barack Hussein Obama and a certain woman named Nancy Pelosi made a call to President Biden asking him to drop out. These people are clearly still in control of the Democratic Party, at least enough to convince the President of the United States to not run for office once again. But I think this issue raises tremendous concerns about the support for democracy that the Democratic Party has. Because we went through a process, a nominating process this cycle. And like Armstrong, I had serious concerns about Biden's health for years. I mean, I was raising this issue in 2020. And so now when I finally saw the press admit that this was an issue, I was like, okay, Johnny come lately, why did you finally decide to stop lying to me and gaslighting the American people? Because I'm on the opposite side of Robert on this one. But at the same time, we saw the Democratic Party prevent any realistic challengers to Biden from entering this race. And I sat down with Cenk Uygur at the RNC, and he was telling me how frustrated he was as one of the few people who decided to enter that race to see no real challenge against Biden in a primary that suddenly was just handed to Kamala Harris, who, by the way, there are reasons why she didn't proceed all the way to Iowa in the 2020 primaries. She couldn't make it. She failed to resonate. One moment, she was saying that she was going to crack down on crime, and then the next moment, she was joking about smoking a joint. And then, of course, we had her go after President Biden. Well, I mean, he wasn't president at the time, for supposedly being racist, and suddenly she's signing up to be on his platform. So we don't really know what Kamala stands for. What we do know is that when she was in office, she went after conservatives and pro-lifers. A man by the name of David Daleiden, whose documents were stolen from his house on Kamala Harris's orders. He was exposing Planned Parenthood's sale of aborted baby body parts for cash. And because he did that, Kamala Harris's office ordered his house to be raided and all his tapes to be seized. And then Kamala Harris's successor, a man by the name of Javier Becerra, which should sound familiar because he's now leading HHS, decided to bring charges against David Daleiden.
Hold on, boy. It's getting heavy up in here. You know, we gotta talk about the elephant in the room. It is a fact. The president is not going to be able to campaign for Vice President Harris. He just doesn't have the stamina. But also, the elephant in the room, we're going to talk about Trump when we come back. Some people say they will never vote for Trump. Some people say they will never vote for Harris. But guess what? There's also a mindset where they will never vote for a woman. Mm-hmm. And we'll be back. Don't go away.
As a home buyer, you need a lender who cares about your home ownership dreams. United Security Financial has been helping families secure their dream homes for 30 years. We're a national fair practice lender that provides affordable mortgages and low down payment programs to eligible home buyers. To learn how United Security Financial can help you secure your dream home, call 1-800-373-4186.
So let me come back to you. Why is it that, well, Trump said something recently when they asked him about J.D. Vance at the NABJ. He said the vice president really doesn't matter. They're either supporting Trump or Harris. But maybe in this election year, that's quite different for the vice president. Why do you feel it's so critical, the person she selects as her running mate?
You know, I tell you, to go back a little bit, I think Trump said that because JD has been falling on his face lately. So he's saying, hey, it has nothing to do with the vice president. But with Kamala Harris, it absolutely has everything to do with who she picks. Because there's some people who will not vote for Kamala Harris because of her race. There's some people who will not vote for Kamala Harris because of her gender. And there's some people who will not vote for Kamala Harris who supported Joe Biden. And these are facts, right? And so what does Kamala Harris have to do? She has to be very strategic in who she chooses for the vice president, because she has to pick those voters who are either never Trumpers or on the fence. And now, let's be real. This election, people have chosen sides a long time ago, right? So the folks that you're trying to convince is about this much. Most people are voting D or R, period. Now, she needs to pick strategically. She needs to pick someone who can appeal to the masses. And, she needs to pick someone who can appeal to the masses. I'll pause there.
Robert Patillo, I know we have not talked much about the former president because you don't need to. Because you know what? Mm-hmm. You know exactly who he is. Nothing he does surprises you. He's authentic. He's consistent. He says the most outrageous things, and you cannot script him. That's just who he is. And so people, when you talk about former President Donald Trump, they know exactly who he is, but they don't know the vice president. And the issue is, how does the vice president make people not only comfortable with her, but comfortable enough in getting to know her that they will at least consider voting for her?
Well, I think she has a couple things going for her. Number one is being not Donald Trump. And as we've seen in American politics in now 3 election cycles, being not Donald Trump gets you about 48% of the country voting for you. And you just got to get the other 2.5%. Also, the way that you do that is, one, the $350 million that she's fundraised in the last several weeks that will allow her to start getting on air right now to articulate and show who she is. Unlike someone like Hillary Clinton, who has a 40-year record and has been well defined by the media, or even Joe Biden, who has a 50-year record and been well defined by the media, she very much comes in tabula rasa, where she's able to define herself and define her own credentials to show the American people who she is. This is why I think the vice presidential pick is so important, because the first rule of picking your vice president is do no harm. As much as Donald Trump says that the VP doesn't help, it can absolutely hurt, as we've seen with J.D. Vance, as we saw with Sarah Palin, as we saw with Eagleton back in '72. And I think that when Kamala Harris picked somebody who was geographically distinctive from her, demographically distinctive from her, and maybe philosophically distinctive from her, it's about creating that wide net of the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party is a big tent, a tent that can keep people from Bernie Sanders to Joe Manchin under the same tent. They can have everyone from John Tester to AOC under that tent. I think Kamala Harris is very much going to be showing the American people that she can work across party lines, she can appeal to all groups, and most importantly, that she can get things done the same way that the Biden administration has been able to get things done, big bipartisan things done that people said were impossible. I think if she can articulate that, she has an absolutely great chance of getting that extra 2 or 3% she needs to get over 50%.
Who speaks and how do they speak, Tyler, to the American people? And we're not just talking about poor people. There are middle-class people now who are one paycheck away from poverty, who are one paycheck away from being homeless, who are scared to death that they just cannot make ends meet. Who appeals to that voter?
I mean, those are the people I think that J.D. Vance appeals to, that to some degree former President Trump appeals to. It's those who really understand. And this is the problem with the Democratic Party right now, is that they are the party of the elites. They are the party of the bureaucrats. They are the party of the people who have this system that will churn through them and that will easily say, hey, look, we can get rid of Joe Biden because he's not the one really making the decisions. We can prop up Kamala Harris because we know that it's the bureaucrats who make the rules. And what matters to us is that our donors can give to woke nonprofits that can influence the administrative state without the checks from Congress and without the checks, even sometimes, coming from the White House itself. And this is where the Democratic Party is right now. So you see Kamala Harris, who I disagree, I don't think she's a tabula rasa. She's a California, San Francisco Democrat. And there was a time when that was not a knock on your record. And I think the Golden State has a lot of good things going for it. But what it doesn't have going for it right now is the idea of sanity and the idea of helping the poor get ahead. Where do people in California go who want to get ahead? They go to Texas, they go to Florida, they go to other parts of the country because they know that California is set up for the elites. And Kamala represents the elites, and most of her party does too. Even the people who are hailed as moderates, somebody like Josh Shapiro has a very radical record on transgender issues, on things that make people go, well, I want this economy, this country to work for me. I'm struggling right now. And you are going to talk more about opening women's restrooms and sports to biological men than you are about helping me?
Why is the stock market crashing?
Oh, man. Where do we start? I mean, you know, the stock market's cyclical, right? So anybody who expects it to go in one direction hasn't been playing the stock market for a while. And so you should expect for it to dip. And when blood is in the water, right now is time to buy.
Is the blood in the water politics?
I think it's a combination. I mean, it's world affairs, it's politics, it's the uncertainty of what's happening next. And I think a lot of it is contributing to it. And so you're seeing the market react in real time to the issues of the day.
Robert, will Iran retaliate, and at what cost?
They will retaliate. They retaliate currently. We saw that there have been multiple U.S. service members in Iraq that have been injured by rockets from Iranian line forces. Hezbollah last night sent about 50 missiles into the northern regions, the same regions that were subject to the 2006 war between Israel and Hezbollah. The Houthis have sent drone attacks over 1,000 miles that have hit Tel Aviv. We're seeing more line forces coming towards Israel because Israel very much has been an irresponsible actor on the international stage, and there's nothing controversial about saying that. Killing the ceasefire negotiator while he's in another sovereign nation in Tehran is an aggressive act taking place. The number of actions that have been taken outside of the realm of international law that have been condemned by the UN very much is on the hands of Netanyahu, and he has a responsibility both for the defense of Israel, which I 100% support, but also in defense of the human rights of the nearly 30,000 or nearly 40,000 civilians at this point, and 13,000 children have been killed during the course of the war in Gaza. So because of this, it's incumbent upon the Netanyahu regime to work towards a ceasefire in the region and de-escalate tensions. You cannot continue on this spree of assassinations. I think there have been something like a half dozen assassinations in the last month carried out by the IDF, and assume there won't be a retaliatory strike by Iranian-aligned forces. And we have to work on cooling that temperature before you launch us into a region-wide war, which will, one, increase energy prices on a global level, and two, has the opportunity of metastasizing into a larger conflict. We've seen through flight trackers over 1,000 weapon shipments from Moscow, from Russia to Iran in the last week or so in order to deliver these materials that will be used against U.S. forces and Israeli forces. We have carriers, battle groups or strike groups being moved to the region by the United States. This has the opportunity to be a powder keg, and it's up to Netanyahu to lower the temperature, come to a ceasefire agreement, work on cooling tensions in the region, or else it has the opportunity to be the tinderbox of the world.
You know, the issue here is that people forget. I don't know if you saw where UNRWA, what happened with the workers today. All 7 were found guilty of being not only a part, but participating with the October 7th massacre on Israeli citizens by Hamas. Something changed with Israel at that moment. A line was crossed. They lost thousands of people. And even more recently, 12 kids were killed by these drones and rockets being fired in from Hezbollah. And anytime, Joe and Robert and Tyler, that a head of state is being inaugurated, and I have the power and the intelligence to go in months in ahead, to go to the guest quarters where the head of Hamas is going to be sleeping, and I can put a device in your bedroom, in your back right, you're inside Iran, and then just when someone tips me off that he's sleeping in the bed, I use AI to detonate it. That sends a message to anybody that I know where you are and I can take you out. I think what Israel is doing is escalating to de-escalate. They're saying we're going to take out, and just like we've taken them out, we can take you out too. I think their sophistication in weaponry and intelligence is so far advanced, and every war that they fought with all the Arabs together, they won. And militarily, they may not have the foot soldiers, but one thing, they have the confidence. And another thing, they don't adhere to saying they won't use nuclear armaments like we do. They don't follow those same policies over the Middle East. They say by any means necessary, whatever it takes to get rid of our enemy, we're going to use it by any means necessary. And so I think Iran is stepping back. The reason why they've not fired yet, because they're calculating. Whether should we escalate this, or how should we de-escalate it? Because we don't know what Israel would do next. Because I do believe that if Israel can, it will take out every nuclear arsenal, every plant that exists in Iran if it's necessary. I think this is a different ball game, and they know exactly what they are doing, and Iran is on notice. Because anybody can blow me up in my bedroom. Oh, yeah. And plan it in months in advance. Let me tell you something. That's a different game.
Yeah, it's a different game.
It's a different game.
It's a dangerous game.
It's a dangerous game.
Yeah, it's a dangerous game.
You got my attention.
Yeah.
There's some bad boys.
Yeah.
A lot of innocent people die.
Yeah.
But you have my attention. Thank you so much for joining us for Your Voice, Your Future. Joe Paul, Tyler O'Neill, my man from Atlanta, Robert Hillard. Good night, everybody.